Hi everybody and welcome to another piano review here at Merriam Pianos. My name is Stu Harrison and in this video we are comparing Kawai's ES8 with Roland's FP-90. Two stellar examples of all-in-one portable digital pianos, both right at the top of the category. This is a really exciting comparison, something that you have all been asking for. We're going to be comparing the actions, talking about the feel, looking at the tone engines and the difference of how they produce the sound, and of course comparing their critical features. If this is the first time to the channel, we'd also really appreciate if you subscribed. And of course, we sell both of these instruments, and so in the description as well as throughout the video, you're going to see an opportunity for special offers with these instruments as well. So thank you so much for stopping by. We hope you enjoy the video. Let's get started on this right away. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to cover between Roland's FP-90 and Kawai's ES8 is a comparison of the sound, discussion of the sound engine, and all of the tones that are included on these two instruments. Now, even though these instruments are both considered all-in-one, there's kind of stage pianos, they're kind of home digital pianos, they really are all-in-one units because they're equipped with very capable speakers. But a lot of the technology and a lot of the quality that goes into this is more reminiscent of what you find in a stage piano than you do in a keyboard. So they sort of occupy a fairly niche part of the market that there's really only maybe 4 or 5 units in the whole industry to choose from. And the FP-90 and the ES8 is one of the most commonly compared matchups in that little niche segment. The ES8 has been out on the market for longer than the FP-90 by probably 1.5 years, 2 years. And so it's not a perfect apples to apples in terms of the technology, in terms of the specs, but really when it comes down to it, we're talking ultimately about playing experience and, musically, which one you're going to connect with more. So let's get into the tech specs of the tone engines on the two. The Kawai ES8 uses Kawai's Harmonic Imaging XL technology. That is, I don't know, at this point maybe the 5th or the 6th generation of the Harmonic Imaging engine that Kawai's been working on for a while. And essentially that combines some synthesis technology on top of a sample bass. So essentially there's a recording of, say, a middle C, and that's done on a real piano, but then all of the extra little nuance that happens to that note when you start playing other notes around it or start, affecting it with pedals and, aftertouch and things like that, all those extra little nuances are actually synthesized on top of it. And so that's where basically what the harmonic imaging is. And so this is, their latest and greatest version of the harmonic imaging technology. It comes with 256 note polyphony, which is ample, definitely for piano playing and even for some basic sequencing and rhythm playing. And it's loaded up with the SK Concert Grand sample bass or a sample set. This is one of the first instruments that Kawai came out with actually that had that SK sample set. Now you can find it on their CN 29 and 39 and throughout their CA series, but the ES8 was really one of the first ones to have it loaded up. It's a very rich, it's a very complex sort of dark tone that you get on the instrument. One of the things I like most about the SK sample set is the fact that you've got this huge color range. When you're playing it very quietly, it's a very dark tone. And then as it comes alive, you get all of these extra upper partials coming out. Back to dark. And a lovely singing treble. So that's the engine that's driving the ES8. 256 note. It's got the SK EX sample bank. Like I said, a couple of years old technology, but still very, very, very satisfying to play. Over here on the Roland and the FP-90, we've got their supernatural engine, but on the FP-90 compared to, say, the FP-60, on the piano tones, you've got full modeling. So this is an area where, at least on paper, the Roland is maybe going to give you a greater level of flexibility to kind of modify and affect the piano tone and really customize it to your liking. And also has the potential to maybe deliver a slightly more complex set of harmonics per note or per chord. Now, does that actually translate into a difference in the playing experience? Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, for instruments at this level, the only way you're really going to be able to make a decision is to get in front of them yourself and play this. So all of this feedback that I'm giving you is really just food for thought before you get to the point where you're playing these yourself. Yeah, so I think, I mean, when I'm listening to it, I'm hearing that the Roland definitely has sort of a greater level of sort of space around the note that's not really reverb, it's just... It's like simulating the air around the note maybe a little bit better. I'm also noticing that the decay on the trebles are a lot, I would say, more realistic. Then again, there's a certain realism that you're getting from the Kawai because it's sampled off such a bloody good acoustic piano. That is like really, really hard to choose. You know, it's ultimately, like I said, this really is going to come down to you getting in front of both, hopefully, and seeing which one of these pleases your ear the most. You know, which one of these gives you an experience that's really going to excite you. Because when you're spending this kind of money, neither one of these is super cheap. You're going to want to have an instrument that inspires you to just sit there and enjoy it for as long as possible. And I know a lot of people who just absolutely love and swear by the ES8. I know a lot of people who have gotten excited by the sort of customizable features that the FP-90 brings. Let's talk about the speakers on these two. The Kawai ES8 just finds a depth of tone that's kind of alarming, to be honest, because on paper, these two should not even be remotely close. The FP-90 has a 60-watt total power output versus the Kawai that has a 30-watt total power output. But here's the thing about the Kawai. The speaker box configuration on there is a lot more efficient. So this reminds me of some of those Bose radios where the power consumption of the Bose radio, like the little, countertop things, is not that much, but because of how they've configured the speaker box itself to use the air a little bit more efficiently, you suddenly get this huge amount of presence. Well, Kawai has built in two separate, totally self-contained speaker boxes on the ES8. You can actually see there's like a bit of a little air port on the bottom, so that that speaker box can be fed with air. And it almost kind of acts as a bit of a subwoofer, it seems. Like there's all sorts of lower presence that you get out of it. And again, you read 30 watts and you're thinking, that's going to be a little bit puny. Not the case at all. I mean, you really lay into the lower part of that ES8, and it's this huge, big, full, lush sound. Coming over to the FP-90, is the FP-90 louder than the ES8? Yes. Simple answer, straight up answer, yes, it's definitely louder. But when you really start to push the FP-90, here's what I find is when you max it out, there's so much sound coming at you as a player that it's actually uncomfortable. You almost need like a low-level set of headphones or earplugs if you were going to be playing the FP-90 at max, because most of that sound is pointed at your head and your ears. It's not pointed out there where you can sort of have a directional amplifier. So the realistic maximum that you'd want to be playing this is maybe only like 10 to 20% more than what you could get maximum out of the ES8. And even though there's all that extra power, I don't actually find that the bass response on the FP-90 is necessarily that much better than what you get out of the ES8. So in terms of just being able to cut through a full room and be amplifier free, yes, the FP-90 does have an advantage. But if you're talking about just playing for personal use and having a nice full sound and being able to get away with just the onboard speakers, not sending it through another stereo or headphones, I would say these are very evenly matched, which is kind of a surprise when I got them side by side. Another big difference on the sound front between these two, the number of onboard tones that the FP-90 has is not even close. It totally kills the ES8 in terms of the quantity of sounds. We're talking about well over 300, whereas you only have about 24 or something like that. It's somewhere between 25 to 30 tones. I don't actually remember the exact number. I'm sure somebody can fill me in the comments, but it's in that range. You've got around 9 or 10 acoustic pianos, and then you've got E-piano, organ, harpsichord, mallet, string, choir, bass. So you sort of have your basic suite of conventional keyboard tones that you'd expect to have on there. And for the most part, I would say that the majority of those sounds are really nicely rendered on the ES8. On the FP-90 though, I mean, you've got a suite of tones that sort of are higher quality sample based in the E-piano, strings, organ pad, and then on top of that you've got the entire General MIDI 2 sound bank, which is on its own over 300. So definitely a much bigger selection of sounds, although as I say, when it comes to the quality, the samples on those sounds, very, very similarly matched, particularly in the area of like the E-piano stuff. And I'll just play you a comparison. So this is 1976 Suitcase. This is like the default E-piano sound on the FP-90. Really beautiful trem effect going on there. Same thing over here. So more, but quality very similar. One edge that the Kawai has in this department is it does have an amp simulator on it with quite a few editable parameters. So if you want to get in there and add a lot of grit to an amp simulator on that Rhodes, for example, you've got the option to do that. You can edit the rotary speakers settings. So it is, in some ways, for somebody who's going to be doing some e-piano stuff, might give you a few more parameters that you would actually appreciate and be able to use. But for the most part, I would say very equally matched up on quality, but quantity, FP-90 takes the cake. That rounds out the comparison on sound and tone. We're going to move on to action now. Thanks for being with us. So let's talk about the action between the ES8 and the FP-90. The Roland equips the FP-90 with their PHA-50 action. This is one of their latest and greatest actions. This is the one that has the wood core, it's got escapement, it's got ivory touch on the top, and it's got the triple sensor. So it's a very accurate action, both in terms of how sensitive it is, but also the physical feel of it is very, very nicely done and highly regarded. It's a very solid feel. It's actually a very un-Roland feel. It's got a nice sort of soft cushion to the bottom of the key bed. And a little bit, or at least you have the sense that it's a little bit heavier than what you'd normally get on a Roland action like the PHA-4 that the FP-10 is on, FP-30 is on, and doesn't feel as mechanical either. Over on the Kawai, we've got the RH3 action, and the RH3 action is something that they've implemented throughout quite a bit of their lineup, both their home digitals. I know the Korg Grand is actually using an RH3 type modified action from Kawai for their new Nord Grand, which is pretty cool. And it also has a triple sensor. It also has the escapement, as does the Roland. So the big difference here is obviously it's two different designs, two different manufacturers, so they feel a little bit different. And this one is not using any sort of wood in its design. So my impressions of these, they're very subtle, but there's a few observations I'll make for people who find these observations to be helpful. One of them is that the keys on the Kawai, you get the impression that they're a little bit more narrow, even though I know when you measure them they're actually the same. But I think this might come from the fact that the white keys are substantially more rounded on the edges than on the Roland. And so I have found, just personally speaking, that when I am playing, let's say, classical pieces where they're pretty technical, and you might find yourself, purposely sliding from one key to another, or doing, large kind of voicing block spreads with either your left or your right hand. Those rounded edges on the Kawai actually make it a little bit more comfortable. I've been in a few situations on the Roland where if I've got like a 10th spread with, with 2 or 3, inner notes, those slightly harder edges on the white keys, I actually do notice. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that definitely comparing them back and forth, somebody might have a preference for one or the other. Something to be aware of. A second thing I would say is that even though the PHA-50 is more cushioned on the bottom than the PHA-4, it's still not as much of a cushion as what you get on the Kawai. So I think the Kawai, in terms of the bottom of the keyboard, probably simulates a full grand a little bit better than the cushioning on the FP-90. That still feels a little bit hard. However, the advantage is on the FP-90, I think your finger tends to sort of spring back up from the bottom a little bit easier. So for people who do not have, you know, the muscle tone that they're, how should I put this? For people who are used to playing an acoustic grand and have the muscle tone built up to support, you know, playing on grands for hours and hours at a time, you're going to find the ES8 really, really, really comfortable. For people who do not have that muscle tone, the ES8 might actually feel a little bit heavy. It might give the impression of being a little bit heavy because it's designed to be simulating that heavier action. Even though the weight of it itself is not heavy, it's just the bottom is a little bit spongier. Whereas the FP-90, I think, is going to feel more comfortable to a wider variety of people who maybe don't have acoustic piano experience. Anyway, so that's my comparison of the two actions. Now we're going to move on to features. Let's talk about some of the differences and similarities in features between these two wonderful instruments. Looking down the range of controls and the buttons on the two, you actually notice that there's a lot of similarities. For example, you know, the location and the style of how they've laid out the tone categories is virtually identical. You've got the same menu controls. The display is in the same place. In fact, I would not be surprised if Roland's FP-90 took a few cues from the ES8 before they actually came out with this design. It's so similar, even in the way that the recorder and the rhythm control is laid out on the right side. So definitely there's a lot of very intuitive design on both the Roland and the Kawai, definitely in terms of being able to select the different tones, being able to access the rhythms, and being able to access the basic recorder function. Here's some big differences though. The FP-90 is Bluetooth ready, Bluetooth compatible. The ES8 is not. There's no onboard ability to have the wireless connection with the ES8. I think at one point they were talking about being able to equip it with Bluetooth if you had, there was like an adapter that they were making for it, so you could sort of after the fact make it available. I don't know if that ever happened or whether it's still something you can do. You can kind of check that out, but certainly out of the box, the ES8 does not have the Bluetooth capability. It does, of course, have the USB connections, so you can get the ES8's MIDI information in and out of any software you want, but you do need the cable. Second difference is you have sort of your basic tone controls like your equalizer and your part mixers as slider functions on the FP-90, which I really like. I think that's a great design feature. That is not available on the Kawai. You can get in there and you can edit those parameters, but you do need to dig into a menu in order to be able to access them. The dual modes, split modes, and transpose are very similarly laid out and accessible. Easy to do on here. So I would say the next big difference is with the intelligent accompaniment. So this is where you can have the instrument basically playing along with you, following your hands for the harmony, and it gives you sort of a basic backing rhythm track. So let's turn that on the Kawai. We're just going to flip on rhythm section. Then we are going to switch it to normal. There's three modes. One finger mode, there's a mode where it goes through its own set of key changes that are already in there, chord changes, or normal, which is what I've got it on right now. And so we can start and stop that. So on and so forth. You can turn the drums and the bass and all that stuff on and off as you want, and all the controls are on board. The FP-90 has exactly the same functions. However, that part of it, you need to have the Bluetooth connected because there's really no great way to access that auto accompaniment just with the onboard controls. So we can do it pretty easily with the smartphone. I don't know if you can see that. Both are easy to use for people who don't want, well, I should say probably the reason the Kawai has it available as a control here is, of course, because they don't have the Bluetooth. So the assumption was everybody's going to need to access the most basic controls and the most important controls from something that's physically on the instrument. Where, of course, that was not something Roland needed to worry about when they were building this because they knew the Bluetooth connection was there. But it's something to be aware of for people who are going to be using that intelligent accompaniment. If it's on the Roland, you're going to want to use an external device that's connected wirelessly. If it's on the Kawai, you've got it right here built in. Other features to be aware of, they are both preloaded with a nice selection of educational method book repertoire. So you've got things like Alfred's, where there's different books that they've got that have, pieces within those books. Those pieces are loaded in here. So a teacher who's aware that they're there certainly is going to be able to make good use out of those. The basic recorder, so you can record USB audio or, of course, play back USB audio. They are both equipped with 1/4-inch audio outputs that have nothing to do with the headphone jacks. That's just great. I love every time a digital piano does that. That's not a stage piano. It really makes life easy for people who have to use amplifiers or they're trying to integrate it with a stereo. They both have, obviously, headphone jacks, and both of these are available in furniture stands from their companies and triple pedal systems, or they're available to be used, of course, just as slab units as we've got them here today in the studio. So there you have it, Roland FP-90 Kawai ES8, a veteran of this category, out for a few years, but still impressing thousands and thousands of people out there in this market with the lovely SKEX sample bank, these beautifully designed onboard speakers, really nice action, that RH3 action that gets so much press and you've seen show up now in a couple of other manufacturers, and easy onboard controls with the triple sensor in the key action. So lots to love there. You've got the Roland FP-90 equipped with the PHA-50 action with the wood core. Really nice, convincing action. I love, honestly, playing for jazz. I love playing for contemporary. 60 watts of onboard power, tons of juice. And I would say probably the biggest feature on the FP-90, the fact that on the piano tones you've got modeling. So anyone who really wants to get in there and meddle and create just their ultimate, piano tone, you've got the ability to do that at the highest of levels. So thank you very much for watching. Of course, no real clear winner here. Two instruments that are both bringing the A game from their respective companies to the market. Get to a showroom, try them both next to each other if you have the option. Good luck with your shopping. We really appreciate you stopping by to watch another piano review here at Merriam Pianos. I'm Stu Harrison. We'll see you next time.